In 1981, this was China, a country struggling to feed its people after decades of attempted and failed economic experiments. Today, as of 2024, China is home to more billionaires than any other country on the planet, at least according to some sources. Others still put America ahead, but that's mostly down to the fact that Chinese billionaires don't only want to keep a low profile, they need to keep a low profile. It wasn't long ago that communists were rounding up the bourgeoisie and other class traitors. Some habits die hard. If the proliferation of billionaires in a supposedly communist country wasn't already strange enough, the speed by which these men and women have skyrocketed from extreme poverty to the upper echelons of global wealth doesn't really make sense. Until you hear their stories. Do you want to see the largest collection of billionaires in a single photo ever? Here it is. The 19th People's Party Congress held in 2017, where approximately 2,280 delegates sat down to set party policy for the next 5 years. Approximately 100 of them were billionaires. With so many billionaires so close to the government, it raises the question. Did these people create the Chinese economic miracle, or were they just the ones that could seize their own means of production at the right time? They say the communist dream ends when communist reality starts. That's why, to understand how modern China got to be so wealthy, we need to travel back to the good old days of 1949, when Chairman Mao became the leader. It turns out Mao's Little Red Book is as good at creating billionaires as Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. But for those new to China's Cultural Revolution, spoiler alert, life under Maoism sucked. One of the worst parts was Mao's war against birds. You heard that right. He couldn't admit the Great Leap Forward was taking the nation a great step backwards, so Mao set his sights on sparrows and other vermin in the Four Pests campaign. By scaring away or killing the grain-eating pests, there'd be more food for citizens. But without sparrows to eat locusts, plague soon descended, resulting in devastating crop destruction. The only way for people to afford anything to eat was to breed sparrows so they could trade their fresh kills for cash. But losing a war to birds and insects wasn't the only way Mao ushered in the Great Chinese Famine. In hopes of making China a formidable steel producer, and thus make his country look legitimate in the eyes of the world, Mao ordered citizens to smelt ore in backyard furnaces. Unfortunately, demand for iron and steel came at the cost of agricultural obligations, so forests were raised to keep those fires burning. Crops were decimated, topsoil was ruined, air quality was poisoned. Oh, and the steel produced was utter garbage. Nice one, Mao. Good job. But thankfully, Maoism slowed down in 1976 when the chairman did everyone a favor by dying. One of the men who stepped up to take over was Deng Xiaoping, but he wasn't going to continue the projects left over from the architect of China's demise. He entered office in 1982 when China's GDP was just over $280 billion. To put that into perspective, Japan's GDP was over $1 trillion with only 1/10 of the population. But thanks to Deng's economic initiatives, China would surpass its Asian neighbors' stagnating wealth by 2010. Now, China's billionaire class could lift the nation's wealth to almost that of the USA, or more. Some think that China's billionaires could make the communist country richer than the biggest capitalist state. Yet some say government interference in the free market will cap China's growth at a vital point in the tech boom. This begs a few questions. Can you really be self-made in China? Does the government decide who gets to be rich, or does the CCP decide who gets to stay rich? Well, it's time to learn how history works as we examine the rise of China's first billionaires. This week's video was sponsored by Blinkist. Blinkist is an app that provides you with the most important summaries of over 6,500 books across various categories, catering to a diverse range of interests, allowing readers to grasp the key ideas in just 15 minutes. Whenever someone recommends an important book to me, I feel guilty, because I know they spend more time reading than I do. It's not because I don't like reading, it's because I want to make sure I'm spending my time efficiently. With Blinkist, I find many titles of my interests and learn about them when I have time. If I find any I like, then I read the whole book. I recently listened to an inspiring book on Blinkist called Lives of the Stoics, which details the teachings and lives of the Stoic philosophers. It's absolutely fascinating to understand their backgrounds to see how Stoicism came to be, and I'm reading the whole book now. Since using Blinkist, I feel like I'm spending my time much more efficiently, because I'm able to get the key ideas before I sit down and read a whole book. Blinkist tailored content is perfect for history lovers, providing you a summary of a book before you dive right in. Start your 7-day free trial and get 40% off Blinkist annual premium subscription by clicking my link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen. Let's start with how Deng Xiaoping paved the way for Chinese fortunes. He famously said, "Poverty is not socialism. To be rich is glorious." But his most famous quote is when he said that even though all people want to become rich, let some people get rich first. He was born in 1904 to an educated landowning father and sent to a private school. However, he would become involved with politics as the spirit of revolution spread. He was such a committed commie that he married his third wife in front of Chairman Mao's cave dwelling. That's the socialist equivalent of getting hitched on the doorstep of Disney's Cinderella Castle. But the biggest difference of opinion that he had from Maoism was shifting focus onto economic modernization. Though the party's new de facto leader wanted to continue Mao's failed experiment, Deng ousted him thanks to the support of his economic vision. The Chinese economic miracle were reforms which saw significant economic growth over the next few decades. The first stage was to open up the country to foreign investment and technology. Agriculture was also decollectivized, while entrepreneurs were finally permitted to start businesses. So long as they operated within a special economic zone, that is. SEZs were rolled out by blending market elements with Chinese culture and traditions, or at least that's how it was sold to the public. But not any area would be blessed with the open door policy. He had selected which areas should attract foreign investment. One was Shenzhen to leverage its proximity with Hong Kong and therefore international markets. Hainan is China's largest island, so its maritime significance was vital to spearhead the country's economic growth. Another was Xiamen, partly because it was close to Taiwan, but also because it shared historical and cultural connections. Though this was a hard 180 from Mao's reign, many industries did remain state-owned, like petroleum and banking. This meant capitalism was kept on a tight, short leash. You don't need to be a political science major to figure out that those with ties to the government had the best chance of business success. The second wave of reforms happened in the late 1980s. Price controls were lifted, and protectionist policies and regulations were stripped back. Bit by bit, China's markets were opening, which means at least one person was perfectly placed to capitalize on this new era of economics to become China's richest man, at least for a few years. Enter Rong Yiren, aka the Red Capitalist. He holds the title for China's first official billionaire. He was born in 1916 to a wealthy, textile-owning family and joined the family firm after graduating from college. On the eve of the 1949 revolution, Rong had 20 factories and 80,000 employees under his belt. Plus, he was the president of the Bank of Shanghai. Needless to say, he had a target on his back. But unlike other businessmen, he didn't flee to Hong Kong or Taiwan when Mao founded the People's Republic of China after the Civil War. Instead, he cooperated with the emerging Communist Party. In return, he was gifted the privilege of keeping his business, at least for a bit. By 1956, he was forced to hand over his assets when all private businesses became state-owned. Thankfully, he accumulated enough favor and influence by that time to protect himself from being dragged in front of a firing squad whenever Mao woke up on the wrong side of the bed. In fact, later in life, when things got really bad, he leveraged back channels with sympathetic party members to have his home guarded by Red Guards from the Ministry of Textiles. Overall, details of his relationship with the CCP are sparse and vague at best. He never joined the party, yet the state's official newspaper obituary on Rong refers to him as a comrade and a communist fighter. It also mentions how Rong was inspired by Mao once he understood the policies of the Communist Party. Apparently in 1950, a few years before he was targeted, he was cordially received by Chairman Mao and listened to his inspiring teachings. Let's call that what it is: revisionism. In actual fact, throughout most of Maoism, Rong was denounced as a capitalist, stripped of his wealth, and targeted by radicals. He was even forced to work as a janitor as part of humiliating punishment. No doubt, a capitalist who was hounded by a capricious communist state didn't see eye to eye with the dear leader. But without detailed, verified, independent accounts, we'll never know exactly what Rong's life was like in 1950s China. Was he merely towing the party line to stay alive? Was he a die-hard capitalist whose economic prowess brought him immunity? Or was he a red elite whose background prevented him from joining the inner circle? Whatever the answers, it didn't seem to matter when Mao kicked the bucket. As soon as Deng came knocking, Rong was back in the party's good graces. In one fell swoop, he'd been appointed as advisor for the economic opening of China. Talk about a career boost. One day he's fixing bad plumbing, and the next day he's fixing bad economics. At the start of Deng's economic overhaul, Rong founded the China International Trust and Investment Corporation. It was still state-owned, but trailblazed foreign investment. In fact, the company was so instrumental to China's development throughout the 80s and 90s that Rong was promoted to vice president of China from 93 to 98. These positions, plus some personal investments on the side, got him widely recognized as China's first billionaire. The year was 1999, and his net worth of $1 billion symbolized China's new success. That's a lot of money for anyone, especially any Chinese citizen who's lived through the 20th century. But compared to the billionaires that came after him, the red capitalist was a small fry. When it comes to rewriting the playbook of the modern Chinese billionaire, look no further than Wang Jianlin. Wang was born 24th October 1954 to a peasant father who'd fought in Mao Zedong's People's Liberation Army. It doesn't seem Wang was as radicalized as his father, but he did lie about his age to enter the army. He joined the armed forces at 15 years old, where he stayed for the next 17 years. He even rose the ranks to become a commander at 27. Like most people who serve the country, he credits his time in the People's Liberation Army with instilling discipline and leadership skills. After leaving, he worked as an administrator for a government officer. But things changed in 1986 when the second wave of reforms were being rolled out. He was interested in starting a business, so he secured an $80,000 loan 2 years later. His idea was to take over a small property developer called Shigong Residential Development. By 1992, the company went public in its first of its kind in a pilot program. Following this success, he changed the name to Dalian Wanda Group, known simply nowadays as Wanda Group. The conglomerate has invested inside and outside of China, including hotels and resorts and AMC theaters in America. It's a partner with FIFA and has its own string of tourism and cultural projects. In 2016, it acquired Hollywood film production company Legendary Entertainment for $3.5 billion, the same production company that made Jurassic Park and Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. But it was its initial growth in real estate and strategic investments that made Wang Jianlin a billionaire back in 2007. To many, this marks Wang Jianlin as China's first real billionaire because unlike Rong Yiren, his didn't start off with a strong hand. Rong was a wealthy kid who inherited a business and capitalized on the few exceptions and immunities the CCP gave him. Wang was from a generation that had a more even playing field. Well, as even a playing field as you're likely to get in China. There's an argument to be had about whether anyone in Rong's position would have ended up so rich. Then again, there's an argument to be had that had Rong fled to Hong Kong, he may never have become wealthy. But it's not as if Wang didn't get a leg up thanks to ties with the government and industry. He's vice chairman of a plethora of industry groups, including China's General Chamber of Commerce. You don't get into those positions without friends in high places. His personal motto is stay close to the government and distant from politics. But is that his way of stressing the importance of remaining apolitical? Or is that him hinting that he knows he'd be in trouble if he didn't dance to the CCP's tune? Either way, it seems politics is much closer to his business than he lets on. Prior to Wanda Group's IPO, stakes were snapped up by relatives of high-ranking party officials. It's possible that Xi Jinping's sister is a shrewd investor. It's more possible that China doesn't want its political elites losing out on a slice of a billion-dollar pie. In any case, the 2015 IPO brought Wang Jianlin's net worth up to a staggering $46 billion, making him the richest man in China. That didn't last forever though. The Chinese real estate bubble burst, devaluing his portfolio. Evergrande's collapse also soured interest from foreign investment. We did a whole video on the Evergrande collapse over on how money works while everything was unfolding. Plus, the COVID pandemic affected Wang's business in tourism, hospitality, and entertainment. His net worth was reduced by $40 billion to a paltry $6.3 billion. The poor guy. But that could shrink even more, according to one New York Times article detailing the company's debt. Once, the Wanda Group was going to have the world's first 7-star hotel. Nowadays, booking a room costs just $160 a night. Perhaps Wang Jianlin's empire wouldn't be struggling if he did what Chen Dongsheng did and married Chairman Mao's granddaughter. He too was born in the 1950s, but grew up in Wuhan and studied economics at its university. Not much is known about his early life, so it's up for speculation how he came to woo the descendant of his country's founder. We also can't know exactly how his family connection helped his business grow. The CCP is clearly going to keep its cards close to its chest. But it's fair to say that if the political elites are the ones who become the richest, then it doesn't hurt to be part of the Mao franchise. We do know that he was the deputy editor of a publication of the Development Research Center of China's State Council. It hardly sounds like a Politburo, but it's not unreasonable to think that he brushed shoulders with one or two party members. All this is to say that founding Taikong Life Insurance Company Limited in 1996 probably had some support somewhere. Regardless, scaling this company also helped him join the board of directors of Xiaomi, a huge Chinese multinational electronics company. Though their phones are mostly popular in China, the tech is giving Apple and Samsung a run for its money. This perfectly places Chen Dongsheng as the middleman between China's political legacy and leading markets. He might only have $4 billion at the time of making this, but his position will likely help him grow rapidly or protect himself from decline. But that might be changing. With the emergence of AI as the next big industry, the CCP is keen to ensure the biggest markets remain state-owned. That means the sky isn't the limit for entrepreneurs, especially if you speak out against the CCP. Jack Ma is the perfect example of that. Unlike the other billionaires on this list, he's not a party member, never had ties with officials, and his time in the West means he's not completely ideologically compatible with the Chinese government. He's been outspoken and criticized the CCP. Many speculate that's why he's disappeared from the public eye. It's not as if the Chinese state is kind of whistleblowers. The guy who lifted the lid on the Wuhan lab leak got into a bunch of trouble. Protesters and democracy campaigners are frequently imprisoned, and the tennis star Peng Shuai's fate is still a mystery. But now that Jack Ma has been re-entered into the public eye, there's a conversation to be had about whether he is the first true Chinese billionaire. Jack Ma's rags to riches story puts all other Chinese billionaires' legacies to shame. As a poor boy, he rode his bicycle 27 kilometers a day just to practice English as a tour guide. It took him 3 tries to pass the college entrance exam. When he graduated, he tried to get into Harvard Business School 10 times but was rejected each time. During a string of failed job hunts, he applied for a position at KFC. He went to an interview with 24 other people, yet he was the only one not taken under the Colonel's chicken wing. So, he started a few companies of his own, to middling degrees of success. One was a Chinese website for beer. It was the start of the 90s, so Google wasn't what it was now. But someone liked his idea and bought it off him. From there, he started making websites for other companies, despite there being doubt about the internet catching on. He says that when his computer got dial-up, he invited his friends around for a party. They waited 3 hours for a single page to load. Sounds like the internet in 90s China was as fast as the internet in modern-day San Francisco. But things changed for Jack Ma when one of his own businesses received interest from a foreign investor. Thanks to the Korean-Japanese man Masayoshi Son, Alibaba got a much-needed injection of cash. When the online marketplace went public on the New York Stock Exchange on the 19th of September 2014, it was worth a gigantic $213 billion. This made it one of the biggest IPOs in history at the time. And he did it without the CCP's help, which is why the trouble started. His wealth is attributed to the investment of a national of a neighboring capitalistic country, not a fellow comrade. For a communist government, that's quite a humiliation. Since then, Jack Ma has clashed with Beijing on a regular basis. In 2020, Ma publicly criticized Chinese regulation oversight. In response, Beijing forced Ma to pull the plug on the IPO offering of an unaffiliated business group. This immediately shows how much power the government has over companies operating in its territories. Jack Ma went into incognito mode after this, though he was spotted in places like Melbourne and Tokyo over the next few years. Some people online say it was just a case of a CEO taking a sabbatical. Surely a guy can hit a few rounds of golf without his company falling apart. Maybe. It's also possible he'd been threatened in one way or another by forces within the party. Nonetheless, his absence in China symbolized a growing mistrust among entrepreneurs and investment. Defenders will say the government was merely trying to rein in tech giants so that other companies would have a chance to succeed. However, critics will point out how Alibaba's biggest homegrown rivals like Tencent and PDD are not roadblocked by the government whenever the CCP has an axe to grind. Quite the opposite. Tencent and PDD toe the party line. They've even been enlisted by the state to protect government secrets. If you think US TikTok has security concerns, imagine what spying Tencent is doing on its Chinese users. Jack Ma has since returned to the spotlight and began cutting up Alibaba into smaller businesses. According to his company memo, we hacked away at the big company disease. If you're conspiratorial-minded, you might take this as the smoking gun of China forcing Jack Ma to give up control and power. And why wouldn't they? With an incoming AI boom that is likely to be US-led, it's not hard to imagine why China wants to guarantee their billionaires and booming tech business keep Chinese interests in mind. The last thing they want is their greatest minds, assets, and funds going to the Americans. But given the size of China's tech industry, there's no doubt more billionaires will emerge in the future. The real question, though, is whether they'll be state-owned or break out of the system once and for all. But maybe Jack Ma's punishment is sign of an impending Cultural Revolution 2.0. Maybe China will finally edge out the US to fulfill Mao's lifelong ambition. Or maybe, just maybe, the Communist Party of China will start to admit they're more interested in capitalism than they want their masses to think. But what's your take? Can Chinese billionaires ever be self-made, or does the CCP have a final say? Be a good comrade by arguing your case in the comments below. We have made a full video on the history of the man who invested in Alibaba, so make sure you watch our video on the history of Masayoshi Son. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how history works.